12 pupils who were suspended for alleged racism at Pretoria High School for girls have been found not guilty following a disciplinary hearing. The grade 12 pupils were suspended after allegations of racist comments made in a white-only girls' WhatsApp group. The disciplinary committee included 3 members of the school governing body and was chaired by an advocate appointed by the SGB. The school principal was also suspended this week pending an investigation by the Gauteng Department of Education. It's not the first time that the prestigious school has been rocked by a racism scandal. 2016, the school was in the same predicament when learners protested, alleging they were not allowed to wear afros at school, saying their hairstyle was deemed untidy by the school administration. Now, the Gauteng Education Department says the Pretoria Girls High has not furnished them with a report of the disciplinary hearings held by the school. The department says it will await the report and will act on the contents going forward.
Actually, we are quite disappointed as the department, not about the outcome, but about us not being provided with the report. As it were, you'll understand that this is quite a serious matter, which we've been working on, throughout the entire week. We are quite disappointed that we don't have a report, and we will then have to wait for that official correspondence to be sent to us. Then we'll be in a position to comment further on the way forward.
Now, Teachers Union SATU says it's shocked over the outcome of the case. The organization's spokesperson, Nomusa Cembi, says the time taken to complete the disciplinary process was also concerning.
12 learners were involved, and so we are shocked that it has taken them basically like a few days to reach this conclusion on such a serious matter. We believe that issues related to racism should be treated, yes, with urgency, but also there should be transparency. In the letter that has been written to parents, the letter has got no detail. It just says the learners were cleared of all the charges. It does not say what the charges were, and it does not say who came to testify. And it's just like treating this as if it was just a minor matter.
Transformation and diversity specialist at St. John's College, Ellen Magubane, believes there's a need to strengthen discrimination policies at schools to address racism.
I think one of the things is also about how to ensure that any restorative approach that a transformation or a discrimination policy outlines must include multiple stakeholders, right? So there'll be something for the students to do, there'll be something for the teachers to do, there'll be something for the parents to do, right? And in that, it allows multiple people to participate in the restoration or in the addressing of justice, right? And any school will keep some sort of logs, some sort of way of keeping track of these issues when they arise, where they're coming from, the interventions that are required, bringing parents in, etc. But to ensure that a discrimination policy works effectively, I think one is that it must get used, and so as it gets used, more and more cases test it. They grow it. They make it. They ensure it's like the law, right? When we use it more often, then we know its strengths. We know where it lacks for us, and we have to make the appropriate amendment.
Right, let's take a look now on whether there is enough policy-wise to address some of these issues that are coming up at our schools around racism or discrimination. We are with Director at the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies, Professor Melissa Steyn, as well as researcher, lecturer in the Department of Education Policy Studies at the Stellenbosch University, Dr. Jerome Joorst. Good to have you both, and thank you very much for your time. Dr. Jerome, let me begin with you. I mean, racism, microaggression, and ignorance. Does it make any significant difference when it plays out to the victim? I suppose the victim reads it as racism.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Thank you also, Professor Steyn. No, I don't think it makes a difference when it happens. When it happens too often in the country, in our schools, and whatever form it takes, it always has a detrimental effect on the victim, but also on the perpetrator, because there's not enough education, not enough information around these issues, which are very, very, very complex.
And at a policy level, I mean, do we have policies in place to help teachers, administrators to navigate those particular differences?
Yeah, we have enough policies. We have the Constitution, Section 9, talking about equality clause of readdressing discrimination. The South African Schools Act, Section 5, the admission policy, the National Education Policy Act, the White Paper 6, special needs education, and so on. We have teachers at universities being trained along the Mr. Tech guidelines, which focuses on non-discriminatory policies and practices in schools. There are enough policies, there are enough guidelines for teachers. I believe teachers are equipped and are capacitated and have the willingness after they've left university to apply those non-discriminatory practices. But it's when they hit schools, then this is where the problem starts, I believe.
Right. Prof, from your view, I mean, does it really make any fundamental difference that we would want to cherry pick and nitpick and say, no, this was not racism, this was just microaggression, or maybe plead ignorance, say, well, no, learners just didn't know that this kind of behavior would be deemed or would be read as racist behavior?
Well, Thabo, firstly, all those things, racism, discrimination, education, they're all wrapped up, ignorance, they're all wrapped up in each other. So, you know, ignorance is part of the way that racism functions. Not becoming aware of the consequences of your actions on other people, or the consequences of what you say on the victims in this case. So, you know, quibbling about them is obviously part. What we need to be doing is to be unpacking all of that, we need to be educated about how these work together to create the kinds of consequences and effects that they do. So part of the problem that I think we have with this issue is that people use different definitions, different understandings of racism in order to be able to advance the particular view and particular worldview that they're holding. And in that way, we could say that some of this quibbling is actually, you know, sort of functional ambiguity. It's deliberate ambiguity, so that one can sort of play the system, as it were, play the field in order to promote your own particular agenda, your own particular project. So I don't think it's an accident that we have these different views, and that we quibble about what is what. It's part of the actual struggle, as it were, for different views of what society should be like.
Dr. Jerome, I mean, one of the things that you are dealing with, as the professor says, it's almost built within the system, right? Where you'd have particular separate rules, for example, in how to deal with hair of black children, or what type of haircut, from a personal experience, a black child should have compared to what type of a haircut a white child should have at school. How those begin to feed into the kind of challenges that we are seeing. Just expand a little bit on that, on how the system itself and how separate, I suppose, treatments of the different races in schools feed into it.
I think that's a great question. I think just because students or learners got access doesn't mean inclusion. When schools open their doors for learners, learners of different color, it didn't automatically open people's hearts to those learners. So access does not mean inclusion. These exclusionary measures has always been there post-apartheid dispensation. It's been there in rituals and songs and dance and choice of artist that performs at a school function. It's been there, and your everyday person reading the landscape makes the calculation that a good school leads to a good university, which enhances employment opportunities in a scarce job market, and ultimately a better life. And therefore, as a black person, I'll just let it slide. We don't want to, stir too much, because my learner, my child, will miss the opportunity of having access to that school and opportunity to learn. But the application of rules in the schools is a problem, and parents, everything for me revolves around parents, because parents should be involved in the crafting of the rules of the school, the code of conduct, and they should also actively be involved in the application of those rules, whether it's fairly applied or not. And our learners are the ones that bears the brunt of the application of those rules. Now, we've seen in many cases...
Sorry, Doc, but these are prestigious schools, right, that set these rules, that set these standards. And when you admit your child to these, you look at the contract, they say, these are the standards. And so if you want to be here, this is what you need to adhere to.
Yes, but those are assimilatory practices. You see, especially at these elite schools, we send our kids to elite schools in the hope of this better life that we spoke about. But it's in these elite schools very often that we as parents then takes a backseat to say, okay, we trust the school that they will apply and be equal and be fair and so on. It doesn't, the examples in the media shows us that. So it is learners, it's transformation, or the idea of transformation or inclusion ends up being assimilation. And your black learners' parents are not necessarily there when they ask you for, why your hair is like that. You are on your own. And learners are through social media. I saw the other day they have this one caption that was very telling. While you silence, we amplify. And through social media, learners have now, come out and made this issue, brought this issue to the fore. And so it's this double standards of applying rules where your school and its governing body and its leadership basically plays word gymnastics to say that legally we are within the rules, but in the ethical application of those rules, the learners will tell you, how serious and how bad it is.
Yeah. Prof, are we asking too much of these schools? I mean, I know certainly I've asked that of my kids' school to exercise some flexibility, exercise some accommodation of different type of hair that does not respond the way that you think it will respond, and you don't necessarily understand even yourself the texture of that hair and how it would respond. But also your teachers needing to be trained in particular language issues and how you put things across. Are we asking too much of those schools, and is the system allowing for that to happen?
No, we're not asking too much.
Sorry, Prof, there. I think we might be having a connection issue there to Professor Steyn there. We've lost the Professor Melissa Steyn now with us. But Dr. Jerome, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Dialogue, is that enough? I mean, if we initiate dialogue, we sit around the table as parents, they call us to the office now and again, and is that enough to be able to push the needle?
Dialogue is important. We should be talking. We've lost our ability to reason rationally. We often shout and are violent in this country at the moment. We shut the other parties down. So communication is important. Racism is learned and therefore can be unlearned. And therefore, things like media literacy is important for our learners, because learners have a co-responsibility on this issue. We should also have compulsory diversity training for staff and students, and continuous training at that, because they have to understand the history of racism, understand its legacy, understand the institutionalized and systematic forms that it takes and how it affects people in their social life. But we should also teach people that you can't just use the race card as a getting out of jail card for non-compliance, for non-performance, because I see that often too. I haven't done what I was supposed to do, and now I draw the race card. And so obviously there are two sides to the story. What breaks in the news and on social media, often one has to take a step back and let the facts come to the fore before we jump on the bandwagon and actually, worsen the situation and not having the facts. So we need to converse calmly. We need to talk about the facts. We need to be media literate, and we shouldn't throw around racism as a getting out of jail card either. Compulsory training in diversity is imperative in our schools today.
Dr. Jerome, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That's a lecturer in the Department of Education Policy Studies at Stellenbosch University.